Good afternoon and welcome to the Garage, the Esports Stadium at the XCL World Academy in Yishun, the northern part of Singapore. I'm Glenn Van Zuffen. I'll be hosting our XCL Dialogue today on why esports is a force to be reckoned with. If you are joining us today, you could be anywhere from Singapore to all across Southeast Asia, up into the Middle East and the Gulf states, or even North America. We do hope that you're going to enjoy this session today. And before we get started, I'll just let you know that we would love to have your comments and your questions. Please do feel free to put those into the chat as we are carrying on with our session today. Joining me, our panel today, Felicia Lim, who is the APAC Head of Games BD for Twitch. Felicia has been in the esports industry for over 16 years. Project managed, marketed, launched, organized for such games as Gears of War, Hearthstone, Overwatch, and Dota 2 Major. She's also a mom to two girls, 11 and 9, so this is personal for her. Also with us, Alex Yoong. Alex is the founder of Axel Sports and also a former Formula One driver, joining us from KL in Malaysia. And last but certainly not least, right here in Singapore, Chong, Geng, who is the president of the Singapore Esports Association. So we feel like we're gonna have a pretty good rounded discussion today. Here in the garage, I'll just mention quickly, behind me are 24 seats, 24 computers, and you can see the large screen. XCL World Academy is the first international school here in Singapore that will start offering a gaming and esports curriculum. It's starting first with a club, and then it will move into a proper course that high schoolers will take. And the educators here at XCL World Academy believe, as many do around the world, that this is an area not to be ignored. Just to give you a couple of stats, roughly 450 million people are audiences around the world, generally speaking, for some of these esports events, expected to reach over 560 million by the end of this year, coming up just a month or so. It is already over a $1 trillion business, the business of esports tournaments and the peripherals, and that is expected to double by the year 2025 or so, according to Business Wire. So it is a proper industry. For those of you that weren't aware of those stats, it is easy to get online and find many of them. Let's turn first to Chong Geng, who is, as I mentioned, the president of the Singapore Esports Association. First, welcome to all of you. And Chong Geng, why don't we start first with a little bit of a definition between gaming and gamers and esports. Where do they intersect? How are they different?
So the way I put it is that gaming is anything which takes place in an electronic medium, where you actually interact with this gaming world or things of the sort. And esports is when you actually take these games and play it in a competitive way. It's strange to say the word, but traditionally, given how young it is, traditionally esports is basically head-to-head competitions, where you could be 1 versus 1, 5 versus team, etc. Very much similar to sports. And as Alex actually quite, well, when we were talking just now, he quite accurately pointed out, it's like the difference between, let's say, scuba diving and football. So for scuba diving, it is a sport, but it is not a competitive sport. Whereas for football, when you're playing against each other, that is especially tournaments, competitions, that is a competitive sport.
All right, thank you, Chong Geng, for that. So there is overlap. And Felicia Lim, if we could go to you as a parent and as somebody who has been involved in this industry for 16 years, so I'm guessing that's fairly near the beginning of the industry. When you look at what incorporates the esports and gaming industries today, how do you approach it, thinking about explaining it to people that might not really have a grasp of what is going on in the world around us?
I would say that as a mom, as a parent of kids, when I was raising my kids, Esports was always there, but it's not as prominent as it is today. So what happens is, if you remember, people standing behind each other watching their computers, watching their friends play, that is a small form of esports where you play competitively with your friends. So it has really changed over time. So right now, I would say that esport is a big industry and it's a business by itself. So you could see big brands taking part like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, the fast food chains, they're all investing in esports. You have international tournaments that go up to $40 million prize pool. I've heard some people say that that's almost as much or even more than what Roger Federer makes when he wins the Grand Slam. So, and a lot of them are below the age of 25.
Mm.
So esports has grown a lot, leaps and bounds since the day I started in video games.
Yeah, thank you for that, Felicia. Alex Yoong, you're the founder of Axel Sports, a team,
Yeah.
and you're getting people together. Racing is your thing, right? Driving
Mm.
is your jam, as they
Yeah.
say. Tell us about your team. Tell us about the athletes on your team, and
Uh,
maybe take us a little into why this is actually should be considered a sport and not just kids playing on, kids playing on the TV in the living room or on the
oh,
laptop.
it's definitely a sport. There's no debate about that. I mean, but, sport, like we talked about earlier, sport can encompass a whole bunch of things. Yeah. So I have my foot still very much in the real life world, inverted commas. I'm in motor racing, so I've been doing it since I was a kid. And we've got into the virtual world because there's so many applications in the sim world that transfer into the real life world, and it's really the future. The future of the sport is the virtual world. It's motorsports is incredibly, just a little bit about my sport. It's very inaccessible. It's very expensive. So having to go into the virtual world at least allows us to reach a wider audience and give a chance to a lot of other people who wouldn't get a chance to drive. And I think that's what makes esports special. It is a huge equalizer for everyone. I mean, even if you have a mobile phone, you can participate. And while you do, I mean, and I'm sure a lot of parents who have this you do worry about cyberbullying and people picking on each other and being responsible in these rooms. Um, it is still a great equalizer. The kids I've been bringing into the sport and been training, because what I effectively do is elite athlete development. It's been very interesting because I'm reaching out to kids I would never have spoken to in my life, from different parts of the world and seeing different ways of doing things. And that's been really great because I do love that equal opportunity for all sort of thing. Whoever wants to put in the hard work, whoever wants to put in the graft, it works. And like any community, you kind of self-regulate. It isn't a free for all. It isn't some guy playing a sim by himself and only him there. They don't. There is a community online, and you're always talking to each other through Discord and stuff and other channels. So it's fascinating to watch. It's so new. It's so different. Our kids, guys coming from the real world to the virtual world, and the guys trying to go from the virtual world into the real world. They have their own language. And things move so fast. It's really thrilling to be a part of, to be honest.
Alex, if I can just jump in on that, since you were, in the real world, sitting in the cockpit of a car, racing around at 200 plus kilometers an hour, and now you are with your team members doing it virtually. Uh,
Yep.
Esports, from my perspective, has really democratized sports and has really brought it to the masses in a way that
Yep.
that other sports cannot necessarily come. You're in KL, for example. Kids in KL that want to race motor cars. Now you have Sabang Motor Speedway where they do the F1, or they used to,
Yep.
but that is not going to be something that 99.9% of
Yep.
kids who want to be race car drivers are ever going to get to be able to do for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But now you're able to transition them into the virtual world and do this. And I wonder how you feel about that, and if it works.
It definitely works. I love it because that democratization of what's happening is a really good thing that's happening. A lot of sports, not even motorsports, a lot of sports is inaccessible to people. You're never going to be a 100-meter runner unless you have the genetics to do it. You're never going to, do America's Cup or a lot of other sports if you don't have access. You're not going to play tennis if you don't have access to a tennis court or can't afford a tennis racket. There's so many things beyond people. So I do love that anyone can come and do it. And the guys that have come from the sim racing background, a lot of them, their work ethic is fantastic. You know, I get a lot of people saying, well, you know, get them a real race car. They're not going to go to the gym and stuff. And I'm like, listen, these kids do 40 hours a week. You think they're going to mind going to the gym 2 hours a day? That's peanuts for them. You know, they're so passionate about what they do. The work ethic's not an issue at all.
Hmm.
And another question keep getting asked is, can these guys be as good as real life drivers and get in the car? And when I first started this 3 years ago, I was very cagey with my answer. I would say, yeah, they're just about as good. But now I've been doing this for 3 years and actually taking some of these kids and putting them to real life cars. My answer is very different. My answer is not, no, they're just as good. My answer now is they're much better. They show better application, they work harder, and they put more hours in. So, and the simulator games are very accurate. So, you know, I believe in that maxim. If you want to become a world expert at something, you need to put 10,000 hours in minimum. And in real life, you don't get to 10,000 hours. In the old days, maybe when you had lots of testing for Formula One cars, you could maybe reach 10,000 hours over 10, 15, 20 years. But these guys can reach 10,000 hours in 3 years. So they are coming into the sport and jumping to real life cars and being much better. I was coaching one kid this season. He's jumped into a real car and now he's in a Toyota development program. He's a Toyota Works driver and he's beating all the drivers here. So my answer's changed now. The guys are coming to the sim in this region. I wouldn't say it's different for Europe because Europe has a lot more racing. But in this region, the drivers coming from the virtual world to the real world are far better than the guys driving in the real world.
All right, thanks, Alex. We are talking about why esports is a force to be reckoned with. I'm Glenn Van Zutphen. Joining me, Alex Yoong, the founder of XCL Sports. Also, Chong, Geng, the president of Singapore Esports Association, and Felicia Lim, the APAC head of games BD for Twitch, coming to you from the garage, the first esports stadium in an international school here in Singapore on the campus of the XL World Academy in Yishun. And if I can go to you, Chong Geng, tell us about the esports scene specifically in Singapore. What are you seeing here? How many teams are there? How many competitions are there? I believe there's another competition coming up in December, the 18th and 19th of December here in town, the Global Esports Games, and one just finished just through mid-November. But tell us about the landscape in Singapore for esports.
I think that I would say that the landscape for esports in Singapore is a little complex. I would say that it is unusual actually that there are so many esports events coming to Singapore, and part of the reasons because of the excellent infrastructure and ability of Singapore to continue functioning throughout the pandemic. To give you an idea on this, earlier this year actually, Mobile Legends actually held their competition, the equivalent of the grand finals, and they are coming back again in December because it's just not possible to run it safely in other locations. So there is a big boom in the short term for esports competitions to be held in Singapore. Whether this will continue as things start to go back to normal is a big question. However, Singapore is still very important as a hub because Singapore has the facilities and also has a good general, infrastructures plus legal system and other related things, which helps or allows people to go and do things efficiently out of Singapore. Generally, what esports giants,
teams are there in Singapore? Do you have an accurate count of how many esports teams there are here?
I cannot. Well. In terms of esports teams, I cannot say exactly how many teams are there in Singapore, but what I can say is that they are starting to come to Singapore. Esports teams which are based out of China or Hong Kong have started to come to Singapore, and also teams located in Europe, for example, Team Alliance, for example, in the US, which have started to look at Singapore as a base. But I understand that the unique capabilities of Singapore, people treat Singapore more as a hub to activate or reach out to the region. I would say that Singapore is important in those senses, acting as a hub and creating business opportunities and also employment opportunities in this space. But it's not super conducive. For example, Singapore only has a population of about 6 to 8 million, depending on how you count it. And if you look at it carefully, we do not have the players which will actually come from the entire region. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Singapore is acting more as a hub for for teams, etc., to be based out of to can enter the region. Yeah.
Yeah. We've seen teams like Team Flash, for example, is one of the more notable ones here in Singapore, and they've actually done some work with XL World Academy and in talking about what the future of education looks like for kids. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Felicia, as you look at the gender divide in esports, there are an increasing number of women, young women, getting involved in esports and in gaming as well. What are you noticing in your 16 years of association with this industry?
I would say that it's really nice to see that there are more women getting involved in esports nowadays. What started off as a male-dominated sports, there are more females taking part right now. From my personal experience, I used to work in mainly a male-dominated space. All my colleagues are male primarily, but I would say that in the last couple of years, almost half my teams are male or female. And there are more people taking part in, like, I think that Singapore has the FSL tournament, Female Gaming League, where they play games. And then there are a lot more women taking part in international sports. I think in Overwatch, there's also female competitors involved as well. So they're coming up, and the society is more acceptable of more women taking part right now. So it's changing with time, and really happy to see that.
The stereotypical notion of a gamer, somebody doing these sports, is guys sitting in a dark basement somewhere, eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew or a Monster or whatever. What dynamic does, first of all, is that still accurate? Secondly, what dynamic do young women bring into this game? What do they bring differently than perhaps young men do? Felicia, I'll start with you on that.
I would say that there are so many times in my career when somebody looks at me and go, "Hey, do you play games? Are you sure you play games? Why are you working with Blizzard? Do you play any of their games?" It's so common, but that hasn't happened recently. And what I would say is that the difference is that I feel that right now there are more female getting competitive. So they're not afraid to show. I think they've always been competitive. It's just that right now they're just coming up more, and they're taking advantage that there are more people who are open to them playing. So they're not afraid to compete openly.
Right.
So yeah, so I think right now what happens is that as the industry grows, you will see more and more female players playing. And I would say also that there are more games, there are more casual, and we do see a higher majority of female gamers playing more casual games. Personally, I play a lot of casual games as well. It's just easy, quick, and fun, especially on the mobile.
Are there any reliable statistics that you know about, Felicia, about, for example, what the increase or percentage increase of women either in esports or in gaming in general has looked like over the years? Have there been any studies on that?
There have been, and I can't quote it from the top of my head, but I know that more than half the people or half the gender that's playing mobile games is female. So that's one of the stats. More than half are playing females.
Really?
Yep.
What? Okay, that's surprising. Alex, what are you noticing from your perspective? Do you have any young women on your team, for example, or are you working with any? Or what have you noticed in general if you don't?
No, I want to ask Felicia, how do we get more females into the sport? Because motorsports in general has been very sexist in the past, and we've always had a shortage of female participation. In the real life world, though, especially in Europe and America, that is changing slowly. We're seeing more drivers coming into the sport in real life, in the engineering side as well as the driving side, which is great. But here in Asia, we're seeing no shift at all at the moment, and that distresses me a bit, because I would like to get a more equal representation of females, especially in the e-racing side of motorsport.
Why do you think that is, Alex?
I don't know.
Is it societal kind of gender expectations, or access is there, right, for games?
Partly it's that. I think also, you want to be able to socialize with your peers. So I think at the moment we don't have that base. So you come in, who are you going to socialize? You're going to socialize with other guys. Whereas I think there's that added aspect. I am hoping that we can try and create a base, and the base will grow itself. But at the moment, on the e-racing side, it's very one-sided, and it's something that we are working on at the moment. I don't have all the answers.
I think that just to add on this, I think Felicia's numbers and statistics just now apply very much to gaming itself. In terms of gaming, I think the number is actually becoming more even now. If I'm not wrong, a statistic which I saw recently was something like total gaming 40 to 40% women, 60% men. But however, unfortunately for the highest level of esports, although there are encouraging signs, as Felicia has noted, this coming from a really low base. Because if I was to talk about, for example, the top 10 teams of, let's say, Dota, there aren't any women. And part of it is actually because it's difficult for for example, for women to break in, because like at the moment it's male dominated. So in a team of 5, if you put in a girl or woman, it will be challenging because they will be living. How do you cohabitate? How do you create that new system of working with that? So just now you've noted, Felicia has noted things, something like FSL, the Women Esports League, female esports league actually to be exact, in Southeast Asia, which is pretty popular. I think what they're trying to do is to habituate competition, to let women know that they are able to play competitively, they have the capability to be afraid. But again, this is a really complicated thing. And I do, for example, for racing, actually, you may, actually, Alex, there was, if I'm not wrong, a serious attempt in the past, which was done by Red Bull, but it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately, because there was no follow-up. But they actually got women to try something. I mean, to try the simulators in Singapore, and it was actually quite successful. But unfortunately, there was no follow-up.
Well, I would love to have their contact details. Invite them. We actually allow drivers to come to our sim center, female drivers, and they drive for free. That's one of the things we're doing, trying to encourage that. It is a point, though. I mean, like you said, Felicia, I think it's also a social upbringing, especially in Southeast Asia, where females are not encouraged to show a competitive spirit. I think they can be just as competitive as men, but they're not encouraged to. So it sounds like the base, you have a more even split, but when you get to the top, when you do have to be a bit more dog eat dog, those sort of traits are not so encouraged socially. And hopefully that will change. Hopefully we get it with the youngsters and change if the youngsters say it's okay to compete. Yes, it's okay to get angry and want to bang your fist on the table to get the results you want.
Maybe you can start an only female club and then have it in the same environment. So that's how I think FSL started as well, which is a really good idea.
Yep.
Well, we've noticed in Singapore, especially, there's a hard enough time trying to get parents, especially, to get their kids involved in any kind of professional sports versus going to school, studying, taking tests, and going into a more traditional type of job environment after school is over. So whether it's football or even badminton or any kind of professional sport, it is a challenge. And I would imagine that is compounded when you add on some of the baggage that esports might have with some people thinking that it's not a real job or a real sport. But let's talk about that. Chong, Geng, is this an opportunity as it stands right now where somebody could actually make a working wage, make a living from doing this if they're good enough?
Okay, so we do in Singapore already have some of the world's top game players, such as Daryl Ice, who's in Dota, such as CN, who is in I believe Street Fighter. There are, unfortunately, you could say that those were of the previous generation, or they are starting to age out of esports. It has hit the same problem as sports, I would say. However, at the same time, what I would like to encourage people is that people shouldn't look at esports as very narrow. When you think about esports, people just think about the athletes. And yes, there will be always the top athlete, new top athletes come out of Singapore. But what we should realize is that esports is actually the ecosystem for the future. It is interactive, and also it is the new socialization tool and a new form of entertainment. Sure. And because of that, when you think about marketing, even something like, let's say I want to go into marketing. If I want to go into marketing now, you need to think about how do you reach to the younger generation who are playing computer games. the traditional forms of marketing don't work or are less effective rather. How do you reach out to these people without being in the ecosystem? You're going to make very bad choices or give bad advice in terms of how to go into marketing. So this esports and gaming is not just about playing or whatever, but being in that culture, being in the tech, like for example, being online and all this stuff. Like if you tell your parents now, don't let your children go online, it's bad for them. That's not something you believe. And esports is starting to move in the direction. You do need to have some experience or knowledge of this particular field. And that's it's not so I'm asking people to widen their perspective on this.
And we've seen that across much of the West in educational programs. They're not just teaching people, young people how to game. They're teaching them how to be managers, how to be team promoters, how to design and develop games, obviously coders, how to design and develop peripherals, how to manage sporting events. I mean, it's everything. It's the whole range that you would find in F1 or professional tennis or any major sport, NBA or American football. All of the jobs are there, right, in esports, but just slightly tweaked. Is that fair, Felicia?
It is slightly tweaked. So I would say that if you look at the entire video games industry, it's really set to be bigger than film, music, entertainment combined. So with such a huge industry, you can imagine the number of jobs opportunity that are available in this industry. So I would say that it is a bit tweaked. So I'll give you my personal experience. I was hiring a team in my previous role, and everyone who applied for the job, I was trying to find somebody with an esports or video games experience, but it was extremely hard to find, fundamentally because there isn't a video games or esports curriculum out there. There's nobody graduating in like a degree in esports. It doesn't exist. However, the industry is growing so fast that it seems that the educational system is not keeping up yet. So what happens is we would have to hire people with a generic background in either marketing, social media, esports tournament, organization, and then we will have to train them up. So a lot of the people that you're talking to in this industry right now actually are born from pure passion because we love video games industry so much, and that's why we stuck to it all the way to today. And that's kind of how we got our experience. So I would say that as a parent myself, video games is not something I avoid with my children. I encourage them to learn about it. I curate what they play, how long they play, what they do, and I teach them about it. What happens if somebody says something negative? How do you respond? Do you even respond? So I think these are basic tools that we should educate our children so that in the future, when they go into this entertainment industry, they are better prepared.
There is some statistic, and of course, statistics are a dime a dozen, but saying that kids entering preschool now, 65% will have a job in their future that hasn't been invented yet, in an industry that hasn't been thought of yet. And for example, just not too many years ago, a career in esports would have been unthinkable. And yeah. Alex, I'm curious. I know your son is a little bit older, at 18 years old, but if you had younger kids who were coming up, probably playing games and doing the things that all of our kids want to do, what type of skills, knowing what you know right now with your work, would you be encouraging kids to develop in addition to just the raw gaming skills?
Yeah, so I had this quandary as growing up also with my kid, because he obviously gets exposed to a lot more as well, being my son. And one of the things I decided very early was to not shield him from that sort of exposure. You have to learn how to deal with it, because as a coping mechanism, hey, they're not going to be kid forever, and they're going to leave your house one day. And if you haven't given them skills to cope with it, they're never going to be able to cope with it as an adult. So that's something we've talked about long and hard with. So yes, on the esport world, it's just more accessible, right? So that's what scares them, because it's so accessible. So if you're not trained to deal with that, like Felicia says, know what to say and know when someone has an ulterior motive or so you don't get yourself in a bad situation. So you need to know when these things are happening. And yeah, because we were, because I know my son wanted to be a driver, I was like, okay, you have to go to simulator racing because that is the future. Esports world is the future. What was nice for me was learning about all the good stuff that does happen online. You know, people tend to focus on the negative stuff, and that negative stuff is really bad when it does happen. But there's so much good stuff that does happen. You know, the whole generation now, they communicate in a completely different way. The way they come with memes and the language. You know, the language is evolving all the time. There's a new saying, like my drivers are going on about heist lately, and I'm, what the heck's heist? They're trying to explain to me what heist is. You know, it's new vocabulary coming into it all the time, and it's changing so fast, and you have to pick up on it so quickly, and that is the communication way of the future. And if your kid does not know how to do that, he's going to miss out, because this is going to apply across everything. I feel it's starting with esport, but it's going to apply for everything. I mean, I'm using Discord. I'm using a lot of stuff like Twitch and stuff that for my everyday stuff. You know, here we are using Zoom and stuff. You know, I mean, when I first got an esport world, I was like, look, how am I going to have meetings with my drivers? I need to see them face to face. But they didn't need to see me face to face. It was just me having to adjust to that. You know, I had to learn the language. I learned because they pick up on nuances so quickly. The nuances I can't pick up on because I'm not used to it. But that is the future of communication. They don't need to see videos. They can pick up nuances just by the words and what they hear and just what gets typed and the speed of how they type. You know, so there's so many of these small nuances. And if you're not going to be part of it, you're really going to miss out.
You know, it's all about balance, right? And we as parents, my son Max, who is graciously here today, playing in the background, is 12 years old, is seventh grader, and my daughter's 15, and there he is. He's going with his Roblox right now, or Minecraft, I should say. But it is important that we figure out, first of all, to understand what's going on and what they're doing, but secondly, to then also help them understand that there needs to be some balance, right? And learning certain skills is great, and grinding is great, but there does need to be an appropriate amount of time spent in studying some other things, right, that may be required at school, for example.
Yeah.
And this has always been a challenge. And Felicia, I wonder, from your perspective as a mom of an 11 and a 9-year-old, have you figured out the right way to strike that balance?
I think just about half an hour ago, my kid came to me and said, "Mommy, I want some Robux." That's the whole idea recently. So what I do is that I always play games with them. I would see how they interact with people. What do they type? So that if there's anything which I see it's not right, I will correct them on the spot. As for Robux, which is an in-game currency for Roblox, what I would do is that I would teach them how to get the items they want, sometimes without paying for it, but how you trade up, because items always have value in game and you can always exchange and trade them up. So these are just little skills that I'll try to teach them. But at the same time, what you said earlier about grinding is very real. There's a lot of games which require you to put long hours in to get a certain item that you want, and that would cause a child to want to continuously play it so that they get the item. I would put time rules so they can play a certain number of hours during the weekend. On the weekdays, they have to finish their studies. And this has been rules which I've set since they were really young, and we haven't gone back since. If they want extra game time, we would have to negotiate on that. But education will come first, definitely.
If you figure out how to do negotiations successfully, let us know.
So if I may just also chime in on this,
Yeah.
because one of the things I've also just see is a lot of the drivers who are very good that I'm coming in and doing some coaching with, a lot of them have gotten to sport maybe because it's a form of escapism, you know, and they just that's for them to escape. So that's obviously very complicated and differs from person to person, but that escapism obviously is not a good thing, right? If you're just doing something constantly because it gives you dopamine effect and you keep doing it, but that's a symptom of something else that is bothering you. So this is something also I've had a conversation with my son about. Listen, you know, you can get that dopamine fix in many other ways. Esports just seems to be the easiest way to do it, and it is something I have a conversation with some of the drivers who are very good at what they do, but I know they grind because it's a form of escapism. Because I'm like, okay, you want to be a professional, you need to understand that professionals is doing stuff you don't like to do all the time, and doing and not wasting energy. Because like I said, listen, you've done your training for the day. You want to go another 10 hours, you're going to ruin yourself for the rest of the week. And that's not a way of doing it. So I'm trying to, so a lot of the conversation is trying to divert that passion into a healthy way to get them to understand, listen, that's just escapism. That's just,
Yeah.
you're not really trying to excel.
Yeah.
And you're just
Alex,
Chong
Yeah.
Geng, go ahead. Sure.
sorry, I was going to say, Alex, you've raised actually a very and Felicia, you've raised actually a really important point, which is that there is a very big difference between training for esports and or training to get better at the skills required to succeed in esports and computer game addiction. And there are some games which are not too good at this because what they require to do is very simple, or rather the grinding doesn't give value. Yeah, and that is actually something we have to acknowledge. Not all games are created equal. A good example of perhaps a good game to introduce to someone who's young would be the game which you can see in Glenn's background, which is Minecraft, because it requires you to be creative, to think more and things of the sort. Other games which are very helpful, other than racing games, which actually requires your hand-eye coordination to be improved, and also which requires you to grind, and or rather to be practicing intricate skills. Things like team games where you are required to work with others and to work with others in a non-toxic way. But if you see, for example, a kid just keep playing a certain game and just using it, especially games which are just there to loot boxy type of games, those are really negative. Yeah.
Chong Geng, take us through your experiences that you've seen when you see teams training. Some teams are what, 5-10 members, it could vary depending on the game they're playing. But what would an average day of training look like for them?
That's interesting. Now,
and Alex, I'll ask a question to you in a moment as well, for your team too. Yeah.
So I would say that actually one very important thing which people don't tell you, or rather which is not known, is that some form of physical exercise is actually required, because a healthy body does impact your longevity as an athlete, and also does also increase things such as your your reflexes, and also your attention span and things related things. That also of course means that they do sleep on time and wake up early for the necessary things. So other than this physical things, and another very interesting thing is that after playing games, or rather after playing a match, they actually stop and pause to go and review how did they do for the match, what can they improve, and this is where all your best practices of sports actually apply. Then beyond that, they also do game-specific training. So for example, for shooting games, there are actually things where they actually train, for example, where you move your mouse to aim at certain spots, within a certain amount of time, or to react to things and that type of thing. Every team has its own specific training. For others, I'm not so familiar with, but there are definitely game-specific types of training which is necessary, and those are not exactly playing the game itself. So as you can see, playing the game itself is not the only thing which is done. The reviewing of it, the the grinding in other aspects, the things which are not fun, has to be done. And this actually separates a top tier athlete from someone who's just playing it for fun.
Absolutely.
What do you see with your team? How do they train?
Is that to me?
How do they train?
Okay, so I have this issue as well, obviously, and they kind of fall into three different categories. I have guys like my son who are started racing the real world, who are trying to come to the virtual world. They generally have good practices, where the nutrition, the exercise is there, but trying to get them to do more hours on the sim is a struggle. Then I have on the other side of the spectrum guys who are sim drivers purely, but have used it as a form of escapism and brought them into the team, and they want to become more professional. And I have trouble getting them off the sim because they're doing too many hours. And when I do need them to turn up and come drive, they're tired or they are uninterested or moody. And I'm like, no, that's not going to cut it. So like in all our team agreements, they all have to have a Strava account. They all have to do 3 hours of work a week, starting off small. But then I have the guys in the middle who have found the right balance. And these guys are training, I think, 10 hours a week in the gym, but they're coming from a sim background and they understand the balance. So
are they training together as a team? Are they
yeah,
individually? How are they doing it?
we tend to train together as a team because there's so much technical aspect to motorsports, the setup, driver techniques, different driver techniques. This is where real world applications work so well because the sim games are so realistic. The games are not so realistic like GT Sport and Formula One, not so much, but the games are more realistic like iRacing and R Factor 2. Our knowledge really helps because I can say, look, this is really good. This works like in real life. Okay, this works, but it's applicable just for this game. This doesn't work in real life. But here's another way of doing it that works in real life and in the sim. So
Yes.
we teach them that. What my biggest challenge right now is, because we're getting to quite a high level, is trying to reach a world-class level. And that's a little bit different.
And how do you tackle that?
It's a difficult one. Every day I'm thinking about it because that's where you really become a true professional, because I consider my team as a semi-professional. We pay them a bit of cash, a bit of prize money, but I consider them semi-professionals because we're not working it like it's a full-time job. People go to school, people have jobs. So we have to be very tolerant about that. But to become a world-class, certain mind that not many athletes, and this is a problem we have in all sports in the region. That's why we don't have that many world-class athletes from this region, because they do struggle to have that mentality where you need to obsess and commit to the nth degree that nothing is going to change your mind. You have a football player in Singapore who gave up his national citizenship to play football. And I'm not saying do that, but that's the sort of commitment you need to try and exceed at something, to excel at something.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's some of the conversations I have with my drivers. Like, listen, if you guys really want to succeed, we have to move to Germany where the ping's not so bad because those are where the servers are, So, but these are conversations I have all the time. I'm just getting them ready. A lot of my kids aren't ready for that yet, but hopefully one day they will.
Thank you for that. We would like to encourage those of you who are watching around Asia and around the world to give us your questions. If you have questions or comments about this topic, esports, whether you have children or not, or wondering what it is about this industry that you may not know, we are happy to take your questions right now. Please go ahead and put those in the chat and we will get to them. If you'd like us to mention your name and where you're from, we'd be happy to do that as well. Felicia, when you think about the training that Alex was just talking about and that Geng was just talking about, is it possible for students to pursue this path and their studies in a way that will not be a problem for either one of those in the current school environment in which most of us parents have children?
I think it's possible to get into esports as well as to have a good education. It's definitely possible. I've seen many teams that I've worked with do that. So a lot of them are full-time students, and yet at the same time, they're taking part in esports tournaments. They do have to have a certain discipline, though. They have to know how to allocate time for their studies as well as time for practice. It's the same as any other sports. In school, you do sports, and you focus on your studies. It goes hand in hand. But I would say that if you want this to be really global and professional, just like in any other traditional sports, it could be a full-time job. It definitely has to be a full-time job if you want to go pro. So I would say that that's not much difference between esports and traditional sports in terms of how much time, effort, your attitude towards being the best. It's similar.
Yeah. Geng, what is it going to take for Asia to really truly catch up to what's happening in the West? Esports are still a bit behind what we see in North America and some other regions. I heard you before earlier when you said, look, people are catching up here and it's getting better. But what will it take? Will it take sponsorships from major corporations to fund teams? I know that's happening already at some level in Singapore and around Asia, but what is the next level that this industry goes to around Southeast Asia or Asia more broadly?
I would actually put it as Southeast Asia because if you talk about Asia in general, you cannot forget China. China's esports system or economy is actually bigger than
Yeah.
most parts, and is in fact possibly bigger than the West. If I remember my numbers correctly, yeah. But what I would say for Southeast Asia, I think it's already happening. And a lot of it is because you need to look at where Southeast Asia is actually the home to two of the biggest esports competitions already, one under Garena, Free Fire, and the other one under Mobile Legends. Yeah, the biggest player bases for these competitions are already here. And if you look, they have actually been working very hard on growing this. And in fact, Felicia was actually one of the forerunners in this area here. So she knows better than any and actually than most of us that these things have already started to come with huge numbers. Because, like, for example, Garena Worlds, which I was last set, I mean, I think possibly that was the last one before the COVID, had something like a footfall of a few 100,000. Yeah.
200,000 what?
Few 100,000 people.
People, right.
Yeah.
And what are the purses looking like? If someone's competing, if they win one of these large tournaments, like for example, the one that's coming up in Singapore on the 18th and 19th of December, how much would they be looking to take home as a team?
Okay, so the Global Esports Games is a little different. This is actually where you are competing for the private country, where it is what it's trying to do is to act as a sort of an Olympics. It is trying to start and kickstart off that as an Olympics where you have players from all over the world coming to take part. The important thing to note is, unfortunately, because of COVID, there are only going to be 40 countries. But if it was not for COVID, we would have something like 100 countries coming to Singapore. So that's what it would have been. That's where the Global Esports Games are aimed at. And that actually tells you, by the way, or rather it shows the growth of esports in recent times. Beyond that, I would say that if you talk about other prize pools, so for example, Mobile Legends, let me check this out. I can't remember offhand what is their prize pool. But it's, I believe it is a few 100,000. Yeah, about 300. I think 300,000 US dollars, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And
that would be among a number of games, right? And a number of teams. First, second, third place, that sort of thing.
Yes. Even the 40 million number is actually previously given, was actually split amongst the Dota's finals. Yeah. So I would say you can roughly say that about half of that goes to the top team. Yeah, for any of these numbers.
Yeah, for Dota, I remember that the winning team, each player walked away with over $2 million in prize pool.
Each player.
Each player. So that's about 10 mil per team, and it's 2 mil per player.
But I mean, to get to that level where you're walking away with $2 million, you're training every day. You're in every competition. You are. I mean, this is your full-time job for years, right? To get to that level. Is it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But remember that Dota is the oldest competition. Mobile Legends is only 2-3. Well, I think we have M4 now.
M4.
Yes, M4 now. So this is the fourth year. Dota is 20, perhaps about 10-20 years already. Yeah.
What are the most interesting? Well, I don't know if interesting is the right word. Are there some games that are easier to get into than others for beginners who do perhaps they may want to go on to a professional track if they're young students? Is it one game or one classification of games a better bet than others to start in on and to start practicing on? Felicia, let's start with you on that. And we'll just go around the room.
I guess this is really, let me think. The best Clash Royale team in the world is actually a Singapore team that's based here. The game is simple, but it takes strategy to play. But when you asked that question, the first thing that popped into my mind was something which I read a couple of years ago. There's this game called Farming Simulator. Literally, you're farming and putting like like hails of bay onto a stack, see how fast you can stack. And I do believe that the prize pool for that was $1 million.
Wow.
And the participants were really young. I think I saw an 8-year-old boy, and it was quite interesting. So
You can find
there are games out there.
you can find success in the strangest places, huh? Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you think about that? Is there a gateway game, or is it more just a matter of somebody needs to play a game that they're interested in doing and that they love doing, and the money and the success and whatever will come?
Me, Chong?
Yeah, sure, Alex. Yeah. go ahead.
I'm the wrong person to ask, man. I do the sport because I love it. I've never done it for money, so I wouldn't know. I don't know how it is for the esport drive, so maybe you guys can let me know. But I've never found any athlete that I've worked with ever make it to the top doing it for the money.
Yeah.
So I completely, sorry, please go on.
Yeah, no, please. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I just don't know.
I think that is true. I don't think, at least, I mean, there is definitely a desire to be the best.
That's it.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it is a desire to be the best rather than I want to earn money. Because the desire to be best is the thing which has been motivating athletes since the beginning of time, or people were competing. And I think that that is the thing which actually drives people to be successful. And I think that requires you to love the game which you are intending to go to. So it's really hard to say, but if I was to say the quickest would be something like Fortnite. But would be things like Fortnite, etc., which are very, very accessible. However, those things have a certain element of luck in them. So it is very difficult to say whether it'd be successful or not. Other than that, I would say that perhaps the most natural one would be shooting games at the moment. But if we think about it, most of the esports nowadays are mostly in a couple of categories. So shooting games, battle royales, MOBAs, then I get racing games, sports games. Yeah. So those are along the lines of the top games. However, I do see this changing in the future, especially with the advent with more advanced technologies. One of the more interesting things is to see what esports would look like in VR, virtual reality, and if things like Ready Player One or Matrix actually come sooner than we expect. I mean, we do know that Meta, or rather Facebook, has already been looking at these areas and all that. So it's the comment just now about most of the kids nowadays will be doing a job which doesn't exist now is really, really true. I think that your most important skill, to keep it short, is just that you need to be willing or able to adapt. I wouldn't, if you happen to be good at a particular game, which is giving out millions of dollars of prize pool, and you've made it. But I would rather suggest that you look at the other areas in which you can participate and contribute in esports, especially if you have a passion for it, because the possibilities there are endless.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Felicia, I think that's interesting what Chong Geng was saying about the trends that he sees. And I think it probably makes sense that they would head into to VR and AR at some point. But what do you see as the trend? Is that the direction it's going? And is that what kids should be learning now, is how to work with a headset on and how to be impactful that way?
Not right now, I would say. I would say that esports right now, it's expanding, it's growing rapidly, and I think that it's a really good time for people to get into esports or video games to learn about it as a career. This is not just about esports in general, but in all aspects of video games, marketing, digital designs, art, PR, legal. it's a lot of different roles that is available in the world of video games. If you want to talk about VR, I would say that VR is still is an infancy stage. There are definitely a lot of roles available in terms of developing the VR headset technology games,
Mm.
but not so much esports. Like I don't know of any big international VR tournament, to be honest.
Yeah. Alex, how about you? Are you specifically going to stay with car racing, or are you thinking about branching out and doing a wider variety, a wider suite of games?
I'd never say no, but no, I'm very much focused on motorsports and e-racing at the moment. And just to add to the VR, I also think VR is still quite far away. It has got its advantages. Depth perception is really useful in a race car, but I don't. A lot of people talking about VR coming around the corner. I don't think it's around the corner. It's going to be a while yet before we're there with that.
Yeah, we got just a few minutes left, and I'd like to go over two last sort of topics. One is, are there any resources or places to go where a parent can access information about gaming, about esports, about if their child is interested and is showing some aptitude, figuring out how to get them engaged with either a team or some sort of training regime. Do any of you know of places that parents can go for that kind of information? Felicia, maybe start with you on that.
Is that me? Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Felicia. Yeah.
Okay. I would say that the easiest way to look for information is just Google it. Because right now, the number of games that's available out there, it's massive. They have different platforms, different genres, different languages. So depending on what your child is interested in, if let's say they're interested in Minecraft, for example, first thing you do, Minecraft, Google Minecraft. What's the age rating for this game? Is it safe for my child? How do you actually play a game? Do you have to pay for the game? Is it a pay to win game, or is it a play to win? Do you have to invest money along the way as a child is playing? All these things are very important. You don't want your child to get into a game that is not suitable for their age. That's one thing. And the other thing is to also monitor, like, does this game has a live interactions? So when I first started my kids on gaming, I made sure that they don't go online and play with other people, because I don't think that they are at the age where they're able to interact with people yet. So the
Yeah.
games that I chose was completely offline. The sisters will play together in a safe environment, and then slowly from there they migrated to Roblox. And then you can start Googling Roblox, what is it about? What kind of games to play? Even in Roblox, there are a lot of different kind of games in Roblox, because it's a platform where creators can create their own games.
Yeah.
So even for that, each time they play a certain game, I would Google, I'll find out what's this game about. Is there age rating? Is it violent for my child? And I'll just check. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. And I want to get on to Alex, both you and to Chong Geng, but we're getting a comment in from an educator. Teacher Chun Min Ho is saying that as a teacher, he sees students are tech savvy because of their curiosity. It motivates the students to look for information, to find ways to solve problems and the things that they are interested in. So, at least one educator is seeing that it is a positive, assuming that it takes an appropriate direction. But back to the original question, Chong Geng, any resources that you would recommend for parents who are interested, who want to learn a little bit more?
Unfortunately, there are not as many good resources on this as we would like. I don't really have any particular resources online that we can recommend at this point. However, what I would say is that if your child happens to be really good at a particular game, which is actually even has esports, esports potential, generally teams would be scouting your kid out already. I would just rather give general advice. Please make sure that, if you're watching this, please make sure that you look at the contracts or get someone else or someone you can trust to look at the contracts, because some of these contracts are not very friendly, so as to speak. But the second thing is, I mean, generally, if they are playing to a certain level, they would automatically be spotted because there are really like leaderboards, etc., on the games itself. So that's how they get picked up by teams. And the other thing to note is that I think a lot of times people wanting to note, especially with regards to gaming and things like Minecraft, etc., the thing which is actually most popular, or the thing which actually is the pathway a lot of these people take, is things like TikTok and also Twitch. Yeah, Twitch, Google Games, etc., where they actually stream themselves. Those are things which you should really be watching out for, because some of these things open up your kids, especially if they're young, to undesirable influences.
As always, anytime you're online, you should be understanding what your kids are accessing in terms of information to make sure that it is appropriate content for their age and for your family values. Alex, I'll give the last word to you in terms of resources and looking forward.
Well, I mean, just I wanted to add to that though, just the if your parents are very curious and really want to know, and your kid shows that passion for getting good at something, come talk to us. Because we're in the motorsport world, we do something which is we do courses for parents. Because we're in the motorsport world, you need support of your parents because it's financial, it's very expensive, so they have to be part of the process. And I think parents should be part of that process with the kids, because there's inevitably going to be success and failures along the way. 100% more failures than success, and knowing how to deal with both is very important. So it's a good way of not feeling alone. And because we want people to stay in the sport and not leave it, we do courses like that. I'm a lot of times I've had parents come up to say, hey, my kid needs needs some help, needs some sports class, help with sports psychology and stuff. And I said, that's what we do. We do sports psychology, goal setting, self-talk, relaxation techniques, all this sort of stuff. And they're like, great, when can I sign my son up or my daughter up? And I'm like, no. It's not for them, it's for you. Because it doesn't matter if I have them for 2 hours a week. It's all undone if they go back and you say the wrong thing to them. So the parents have to come to us first to understand what we're trying to do, because if they have to reinforce the right positive influences in the kid, because there's nothing we can do if it's not reinforced back home.
Thanks, Alex. We've come to the end of our time. I want to thank Alex Yoong, the founder of XCL Sports, Chong, Geng, the president of the Singapore Esports Association, and Felicia Lim, the APAC head of games BD at Twitch. It has been our pleasure to bring this interesting topic of why esports is a force to be reckoned with. I'm Glenn Van Zuffen, coming to you from the Esports Stadium at the XCL World Academy in Yishun here in Singapore. Thanks to all of you for coming on today, and thanks for all of you at home for watching.